Hey folks, we're about to get started. If everybody can come in and take a seat, please. Everybody that's in the hallway, please come on in. We're about to get started. Thank you. Everybody grab your seat. Come on in.
All I do is just who I am, welcome everybody here, introduce yourself. And then you'll introduce Kennedy. Okay. Okay. Do you mind asking questions? Do you mind asking the questions?
I have to be back with the table for voter registration. They're about to start setting up.
Okay, well you can go do that.
Let me see. You want me to get some more?
No, it's okay. Yes, please. Please.
Alexis, see if you see Ken out there.
Or Grace. Grace is right there. Grace is right there. Grace is literally right there. Yeah, but the questions aren't right now. The questions are afterwards.
Good? Y'all good? You ready? All right. No nerves, no nothing. You good?
Yes.
You got this. Y'all got this. Ask the questions.
We're not asking the questions right now.
Don't
We're
mind.
doing the welcome and introduction. The questions are last.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Just checking on you.
Are you gonna be here? Okay. Oh, that's Derek Lewis. I thought that was Derek Jackson. Okay, great. Great. What? Hello. No, I'm already in the chapel. I'm already in the chapel. I'm already in the chapel. I literally don't know what to say. This is just a list of names I have to. Okay, okay. Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm talking. Hi, everyone, and thank you all for coming. Yay. I am Maya Davenport, the SJ president here. I want to thank you all for coming and thank Mr. Beto O'Rourke. A few acknowledgments of the people who are in the building. We have Councilman Cheto Vela, Councilman soon-to-be Congressman Greg Cesar, County Commissioner Ann Howard, Williamson County Justice of the Peace Renee Schalk, and Luke Warford, candidate for Railroad Commission. And I'm going to pass it on to Kennedy Fierce, who is senior class president.
Hey y'all, what's going on, HD? How y'all doing today? How midterms going? Yeah, I know. Y'all look good. Ooh, y'all look good. I see your voting shirt. Yes, ma'am, I see you. Man, y'all know what I love about my university? We are small, but we are blessed, and we are loved. Yes, ma'am. Y'all. But what makes us great is how small and a tight-knit community we are. Do y'all know we are so lucky to have our local politicians come up to our university and speak? Y'all know we had Lloyd Doggett, we had Natasha Harper Madison, we had Cheryl Cole, and many more. And now we got Beto. What other HBCU know doing this? I'll wait. But I'm not about to hold y'all. Please put your hands together and welcome the new governor of Texas, Beto.
Huston-Tillotson, how we doing? Yeah. You sound many, many times greater than your size right now, okay? So Kennedy's absolutely right. And to Maia, thank you for having us here. To everyone who helped to make this happen, to our members of the City Council, the Commissioner's Court, future member of Congress, Justice of the Peace. It's really powerful, your presence at this moment, literally 34 days away from when we're going to decide the outcome of this election. And by extension, we're going to decide the future, the fortune, the fate, the state of Texas, and by extension, the United States of America. And just putting it in those terms, I feel pretty lucky, and I hope you feel as fortunate to be part of it. This is one of those singular, defining moments of truth over the course of this country and our state's history. Think about what we're up against right now just in the state of Texas. And I won't name all of the challenges because we just don't have enough time. But I'll name some of the big ones that we're up against right now. In this state, we have a total ban on abortion, on reproductive health care freedom, meaning that abortion's outlawed at conception. There's no exception for rape. There's no exception for incest. And functionally and effectively, though they may say to the contrary, there's no exception for the life of the mother or for any woman or girl in the state of Texas. We already lead the country and much of the developed world in a crisis of maternal mortality that is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. And here's why. Over the last 10 years, those in power, like Greg Abbott, have foreclosed opportunities to seek a safe legal abortion, and by so doing have foreclosed opportunities to get a cervical cancer screening or see a family planning provider, or in the least insured state in America, just be able to see any doctor at all. And we're losing the women among us faster than almost any other place in America today. Certainly going to, and already is, much worse for so many of us right now. If that were not enough, it has been 19 weeks as of yesterday since 19, 10, and 11-year-olds lost their lives up against a guy armed with an AR-15 in Uvalde, Texas, Robb Elementary School, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, able to walk into that school and kill those kids, damaging their bodies so badly that their parents could only identify them by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA swab that they took. We know that that happened in my hometown of El Paso in 2019, in Midland, Odessa, in Sutherland Springs, Santa Fe High School in Galveston County. Those are 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. They've taken place in this state in just the last 5 years. But we also know this. Though their names don't make the newspaper, and we won't see their faces on the news tonight, every single day in this state, young people are killed, 1, 2, 3 at a time, disproportionately black and brown, disproportionately in communities like Austin and Houston, and maybe so numbingly common that it doesn't shock the conscience of our communities or this state or this country anymore. But I want to tell you this. Gun violence today is the leading cause of death for children and teenagers. And 19 weeks after Uvalde, not a single thing has changed to make it any less likely that any of our younger brothers or sisters in any classroom across the state are any less likely to meet the same fate as those kids in Uvalde on the 24th of May, 2022. And then there's this, our democracy and the right to vote, and the ability to freely and fairly choose those who will serve us and represent us in these positions of public trust. It is harder to vote in the state of Texas. It is harder to get your name on the rolls in this state than it is anywhere else in the United States today. And that suppression and intimidation is not aimed at people who look like me. As it always has been in this state since the end of Reconstruction, it is aimed at black Texans, at brown Texans, now at Asian American Texans, and Texans with disabilities who are having a harder time being able to get to the polls or being trusted when they are forced to mail in a ballot. 13% of them, 13 out of 100, were rejected in the elections that we just had in March. If 13% of the ballots were rejected in an election that we heard about in Russia, we'd say, okay, that makes sense. That's not a real democracy. They're not like us. But today, that is us, at least here in Texas. Let me tell you why. 750 polling locations have closed down in this state over the last 10 years. We're the fastest growing state in America. We've had twice the number of poll closures as the next closest state, and most of those closures have occurred in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in Texas. It's very clear who those in power want to vote and who those in power are trying to keep from voting. When you see, as I predict that you will, a line 6 hours deep outside of TSU on Election Day, just remember that yes, there are a lot of people who want to vote, and yes, they're willing to wait 6 hours to do that, but not a single one of them should have to. When those other polling places have been closed in that neighborhood, they are forced to. And imagine those who are working too hard or too many jobs, or taking care of their kids, or caring for their folks, too busy with life, or are not going to put up with the indignity, and they're not in that line. We never hear their voice. We never count their vote. 7 million of our neighbors, our friends, and our family members, though eligible to, did not cast a ballot in the 2020 elections. Arguably, the most important that we've ever had until this year in 2022. They're not lazy. They don't lack any love for this democracy. Literally, they have been drawn out of participating and counting and power. But here's the answer to all of that. It is all of us. No candidate, no political party, no magical amount of money is going to overcome any of this. It's got to be us deciding that we are more than a match for this moment. And look, I'm the first to admit that this can be intimidating. I'm well aware that should I win, I'll be the first Democrat since 1990, when Ann Richards, one of, if not the greatest of all time, won this position of public trust. It's been since 1994 since any Democrat has won statewide. This is tough, not going to be easy, straight uphill, and the path is as narrow as they come. But I remind myself of this. We've been up against bigger challenges, against longer odds before, and we've overcome them. When it comes to democracy and the right to vote, that which makes everything else in our lives, in our country, in this state possible, I want you to remember this. 99 years ago, the Texas state legislature deemed African Americans unfit to vote. They created what was known as the white primary in Texas. And to be clear, it was not, please tell me how many bubbles are in this bar of soap, or how many jelly beans in this jar, or recite this passage of the state constitution to me, or a literacy test, or a poll tax. It literally said in state statute, in black and white, if you were black, you could not vote. In 24, the next year, Dr. Lawrence Nixon from El Paso, Texas, a physician who chartered the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas in 1914, who never missed an election. Though he was black, he paid his poll tax that year, went to his normal polling place, presented the poll tax receipt to the registrar there, and was told, Dr. Nixon, you know we can't let you vote. And Nixon responded, I know you can't, but I've got to try. He sued for his right to have his voice heard, his vote counted. His suit was rejected in the Western District Federal Court in El Paso. He appealed it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court and won not one, but 2 signal Supreme Court victories. That fight lasted more than 20 years. Now imagine the persistence and the patience and the tenacity and the courage and the strength. You've got to know that Nixon's friends and family members were asking him along the way, hey, when are you going to give this up? You are never going to win. You're literally up against the machinery of the state of Texas, of the United States of America. And yet he persisted. And by 1944, with the Smith versus Allwright decision, he began to win the integration of our elections. Not perfect at that time because we still had Jim Crow and every other manner of suppression and intimidation, but we had made progress. And I tell you what, there is no way that in 65, LBJ, the first Texas president, is able to sign the Voting Rights Act into law, creating the first true multiracial democracy in American history, without Dr. Lawrence Nixon back in El Paso in 1924. Now that came from us, the people of Texas. So when we see this craziness, this extremism, this hatred, this cruelty, this chaos, that's reflective of the guys in power. That's not reflective of us and who we are and our values and our history and what we are capable of at this moment. So I want you to know this. If you're willing to join me, join all of us in this effort. Yes, registering to vote for those not registered is important, and your deadline is the 11th. Yes, voting, and I'd love you to vote on the first day of early voting, which is the 24th of this month. That's critical as well. But that will be insufficient to the task at hand. I need your help in reaching out to those that you know in your life. Your family members, your friends, your classmates, your colleagues, your neighbors, the folks that you may only know online through social media. You've got to help me bring them in. They may or may not see the TV ads that we put up or the posts on Twitter or TikTok. They may not be persuaded by what I say, but they know you and they trust you. And if you verify and validate that this is the real thing, and the stakes can never be higher, and the chance can never be greater, and literally the outcome depends on their participation, I guarantee you they are more likely to vote and to vote with us than if you had not engaged in the first place. There are a number of volunteers who are here in yellow reflective vests, and each of them has a clipboard, and on that clipboard are opportunities to sign up to be able to go out there and do the work. This is not one that's going to be easy. You can't phone it in. We cannot do this at a distance. It's going to be tough. But just remember how tough it was for those who preceded us, and how, sometimes we hear about the fact that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. Well, that's true. But I want you to think about what Dr. Nixon and LBJ and John Lewis, who provoked LBJ to work on that Voting Rights Act, what all those who before us have struggled and sacrificed and served for. In some ways, we are the heirs to what they have done. And what we do with this inheritance, we either squander it or build upon it, will determine our future and define us in the pages of history and in the eyes of our kids forever. Literally, 246 years into this experiment, we're either going to win it or lose it forever, and it happens right here in the state of Texas. And I'll close with this, and we brought another microphone to get some more voices into the conversation. I'm going to listen to and learn from you as well. I'll close with this. Not only does winning allow us to overcome these threats and challenges, to restore the right for every woman to decide her own future, her own body, her own health care. Not only can we end the suppression of Texas voters and have online voter registration and citizen-led redistricting commissions and replace Confederate Heroes Day as a state-celebrated holiday with Election Day as a state-celebrated holiday, not only can we make sure that we stop the bad stuff that is coming down the pike, but we can do truly great things by and for one another. Imagine making sure, for those aspiring educators and current teachers, counselors, and librarians in the hall with us today, if we paid every educator in Texas enough so that she didn't have to work a second or a third job. Imagine those retired educators getting a cost of living adjustment every year so that they can enjoy their retirement. Imagine canceling the STAR test so that kids can focus on the lessons at hand and being able to achieve their full potential. Imagine doing common sense, bipartisan things like, I don't know how exciting or sexy this is, but expanding Medicaid, which is a program that we came up with in Texas. We do that. We bring $10 billion back every single year of our federal income taxes, and we use it to connect more people with care that literally will save their lives. Or this one, I haven't found the person who will argue the other side of it. Let's legalize marijuana, cannabis in the state of Texas. Stop putting people behind bars for possession of a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country. And then given the fact that all Texans, regardless of race, ethnicity, any other difference between us, use marijuana at roughly the same rate, but disproportionately black and brown Texans are stopped, are frisked, are incarcerated, who upon release have to check a box on every employment application form. Let's expunge the arrest records of anybody who has served time for possession of this substance as well, right? We can do that. There's really no limit to what we are going to be able to achieve. But first, and most importantly, we have got to win this. And the only way it happens is if we sign up today and commit ourselves to the work ahead. And here's the great news. If I was asking this of you a year ago, you'd have to envision 12 months of hard work being on those doors. There are only 34 days left in this election. 34 days before the 8th of November. You can do anything for 34 days. And what if it's just 1 day a week, 2 hours a week, 1 hour a week of having these conversations with our fellow Texans and bringing in those who are the targets of suppression and intimidation and making them the margin of victory when we win this on election night. You all with me? Yeah, all right. Okay, this is what I want to do. Without chewing up too much more time, you hearing from me, why don't I hear from you? Cynthia Cano's got a microphone. You can raise an idea. You can ask me a question. You can ask Greg Casar, your future member of Congress, a question if you want. Anybody with any question, any idea is welcome to join the conversation. I'll be as brief as I can in my responses so we get as many people as we can into the conversation. You're up. Thanks for joining.
Hi, my name is Kiera, and I just had a quick question. What made you target HBCUs and universities as a whole this election?
Thanks for the great question. We're here today. We're grateful to be here today. Yesterday we were at Wiley in Marshall, Texas. Last week at Prairie View A&M and Texas Southern University. Soon we'll be back at Paul Quinn College in Dallas. Why am I going to these HBCUs across the state of Texas? These are the future constituents who I hope to be able to serve. And my best hope of being able to do that is just as I am with you right now, listening to and learning from those that I want to be able to represent. What are the issues that are most important to you? Where are we failing as a state? Where are we doing well? What are your aspirations? Where are your hopes? And how do we achieve them? And then there's this. And this is uncomfortable for some Democrats to talk about and some Democrats to hear. Present company excluded, especially those representatives who are among us. But far too often, Democrats say, if you're black, you're already for me. Why should I waste my time fighting for earning your vote? I'm going to go after somebody else, that mythical white suburban soccer mom. She's somehow going to win this election for us. And what I think we've effectively done as a party, again, present company excluded, is taken for granted those who have borne the greatest level of support for this party and our candidates historically, at least going back to the 1960s. And without being here right now, I think I would effectively be taking you for granted and be making the very same mistake. I have not earned your vote. I'm not counting on it until I've come here to be with you, to work with you, and to find out how we are going to win this together. And I think that lack of engagement and participation explains some of the outcomes that we have seen in Texas. Look, we don't begrudge UT Austin or Texas A&M, but I'll tell you what, they have the largest endowments of any public university in the United States of America. When I look at TSU and Prairie View A&M, they're getting pennies on the dollar from a state that is the 9th largest economy on the planet today. So I want to make sure that we are using these resources effectively and being with those who will most benefit from a more equitable approach to governance in the state of Texas is a guarantee that we're going to get it done. And even better, if you'll have me, after we win this, I want to be here as your governor so that you can hold me accountable in this same hall. So thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Thea. I'm a computer science student and Apple Scholar. So a little bit of my concern is you said to use all your resources, right? So let's not front. The cannabis industry is the biggest industry right now. My concern is, are you going to stop all these big businesses coming in and making sure the licensing is so hard to get, it's so expensive, the average person can't even start even the smallest business on Amazon. So how are you going to make it equitable? How are you going to make it fair? And how are you going to stop all these big businesses from taking opportunities from the people that make it hot?
Thea, thank you for the question. This is really good. So we make cannabis legal in the state of Texas. We expunge the arrest records for those who've served time for possession of this substance. But then big corporations come in and write off with all the profits. And it may be especially galling or add insult to injury and indignity that those who have borne the brunt of the cost of incarceration and this disproportionate enforcement of the law end up being last in line in the ability to be able to qualify or to get access to capital or to be able to run these businesses, or in other words, to profit from the success that we're now going to make available. Here's what I want to do, if you're willing. I would love to work with you to be able to answer your question, to make sure that, one, we support small business owners, and two, we put first in line those who were more likely than not to be incarcerated, more likely than not to have this conviction on their record, not only making it harder to get a job, as I pointed out earlier, but try getting a small business loan with that conviction on your record. That expungement and that intentional restorative justice that we could apply here in Austin or really any part of Texas for that matter, standing up for the small business owner instead of the corporation, that might begin to make it better here in the state of Texas, and not just make sure that this is legal and that we stop doing the wrong thing, but we make what was wrong a little bit more right. So I'm looking forward to working with you and anyone who wants to be a leader on this to make sure that we get this done. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Hello. Hi, I'm Kennedy Hartman. If elected, will you work with us to fund Texas HBCUs in support of HBCU education? And what's your plan to support these HBCUs? I heard you mention earlier how PWIs get more funding. So what's your plan for HBCUs in Texas?
Yeah, thanks for this question. The answer to your first question is yes, I will. We do not lack for resources. I mentioned we're the 9th largest economy on the planet, $2 trillion gross domestic product. The state's budget, your state government's budget, that's before we get to the commissioner's court or to federal appropriations to this state, is $250 billion every biennium. So we have the resources to invest in HBCUs. We have just thus far lacked the political leadership that is willing to deploy those resources where they can do the most good. I mentioned being more equal or thinking about equity in terms of how we spend on higher education. I talked about how well UT Austin and Texas A&M are doing. And again, we want them to continue to do well. But we don't want that to happen at the expense of other public universities like some of these HBCUs that I've mentioned here. Right now, we are spending a fraction of the state's commitment, what we have already said we will fund in our current state budget. But those HBCUs, they have no leverage to get the remainder of that money, and they don't have a governor who's listening to them, showing up, and fighting for them. So I will do that, and I'll make sure that we work with legislators, Republicans and Democrats alike, to make sure that we get fair funding at every HBCU in the state of Texas. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
I have one more question. What are your direct plans when it comes to abortion rights and female reproductive rights, when it comes to birth control, having underage girls have access to abortions and birth control and things like that? Because I know there's some control on that and making it really hard, especially with Planned Parenthood.
So we were saying earlier, this is the most extreme state under Greg Abbott. Total abortion ban, no exception for rape or incest, happening in the midst of this maternal mortality crisis. What's the other side of that? After we win, we have to make sure that the goal remains, until we achieve it, full reproductive health care freedom, full bodily autonomy. That means returning to the standards set in Roe versus Wade in 1973, which, by the way, and I know you all probably already know this, but it bears repeating, that decision was won by Texas women. Jane Roe, Texas woman. Her two attorneys, Linda Coffey, Sarah Weddington, young Texas women who prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court in 1973 to win this right to privacy, to protect your ability to make these decisions without government intervention. That's where I want to get back to. And I want to make sure that in addition, we are fully funding women's health care, and especially intentional about black women's health care. I mentioned within that maternal mortality crisis, 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. That has been a problem not just of Greg Abbott's making this year, although he has certainly exacerbated. This is a long-standing problem in the state of Texas. And it has got to be those who are most affected who are at the front of the line in devising the solutions, the care, and the change. So I want to make sure that that is part of the program in Texas as well. So full restoration of reproductive health care freedom, and then an intense focus on maternal health care and women's health care, especially for black women in the state of Texas. Thanks for asking.
Hello. My name is Manny Edwards. I'm a kinesiology major at the school, and I had 2 questions, but one of them was regarding abortions. I was just going to state some facts and just get your opinion. But before this ban happened, 54 million abortions overall in the United States, right since 1973. 19 million of those were blacks, right? In Mississippi, 79% of abortions were from black women, DC 60, and Georgia 59. And also Planned Parenthood being 79% African Americans. We have one right down the street. And one man that is a eugenicist, Frederick Osborne, said in the 1920s that abortion is one of the greatest achievements in our time. He was one of the leading eugenics people in the 1920s, of course, right? And I find that your point about most deaths from kids related are gun violence, which is, you know, a very much smaller amount than abortion. 2,600 kids per day die of abortion, right? And over 19 million blacks have died of abortion since 1973. So how do you condone that action? Because that's 19 million. That's a whole entire generation, right?
So are you in favor of this complete ban without exception for rape or incest that begins at conception?
I believe that the ban is warranted because the fatality rate that we're putting up with is less than 3% for women and for black women. And it relates nothing to 19 million, right? It's probably in the thousands, even the tens of thousands, even if that's to 19 million.
So you and I, it sounds like, may differ in our conclusions on this issue, but I respect the point that you're making and the question that you're asking. I guess what I come down to is my trust for the woman to make that decision for herself, and the fact that that's been the law here for the last 50 years. But I appreciate you asking, and I appreciate you being here.
Surely. And my second question, I had 2. Another one was with border security. With that, we all heard that earlier in June that over 53 migrants died in a truck, right, trying to get to this to the border, right? And that also one of the leading causes of death here in the country of our United States citizens is drug overdose, and most of these drugs are coming from Mexico and China, primarily fentanyl. Fentanyl relating to 75% of these deaths, but also we have a major problem with human trafficking and smuggling, obviously. So what are your plans to help protect the border? Because with this rate, when we have Mayorkas in our homeland security, it's not working. People are dying at the border, and we need some way to protect it because obviously we have people that are coming in that aren't exactly vetted. These people could be anybody. These people could be citizens, they could be people wanting to come in here legally, they could be terrorists. So what is your plan to be able to deal with that?
Thank you. Really good question. You're right. We've got tens of thousands of people, cumulatively hundreds of thousands of people who are coming into this country in between ports of entry. And to the point made right now, we're not sure whether they're coming to work, whether they're coming to join family, whether they're coming to seek asylum, unless they are interdicted. And we have an encounter with law enforcement, primarily Border Patrol. Here's what we know by and large about those that we're encountering. Many are coming here to work jobs that no one born in this country, for whatever reason, is willing to work. Others are, in fact, jumping a line. I don't condone this, okay? But I'm just explaining what's happening, and I understand why people do this. A line that in Mexico, for example, stretches 20 years long right now. If you want to join a family member here in the U.S., and you want to immigrate legally from Mexico, you can wait up to 20 years to do that. Again, I don't condone, but I understand why someone might not want to wait 2 decades to join family. And perhaps the largest group right now are asylum seekers. These are folks who know that to stay in their home countries means to die in their home countries, or at least their kids might very well die in El Salvador, in Haiti, in Honduras, and in Guatemala. But today, the gentleman's exactly right. There's not a safe, legal, orderly path for these people to do the right thing. The adjudication on an asylum claim is 6 years. What that functionally means is that if you've made it 2,000 miles from Honduras on foot atop a train known as the Beast, and you get to our front door, you might be waiting in a refugee camp for 6 years until they call your number. And look, some people do that. Some people are with their 3-year-old child and they say, you know what, the heck with this, I'm not staying here. I'm going to cross in between ports of entry. Not legal, not the right thing to do, but again, I understand why people do that. What we need now are solutions, and this is what you're asking for. So here's what I propose. If you come here to work, you want to work a high-tech job here in Austin. You want to work picking onions in Brownsville, at the Cotton Gin in Roscoe. I want there to be that safe, legal, orderly path that you and your employer can pursue. Right now, to sponsor an immigrant visa takes tens, if not many more hours than that. It takes a lot of money. It takes navigating a bureaucracy, and far too many people just dispense with it altogether and work outside of the law. Let's make sure that that is far easier, more legal, more orderly, and safer for those coming here to be able to do that. For those waiting 20 years from the Philippines, from India, from Mexico, let's work with our federal partners to lift the visa caps so that it's a much shorter wait time, so that we don't provide an incentive to jump that line and cross between ports of entry. And on asylum seekers, I mentioned the wait time is 6 years right now. We hire more judges, more adjudicators. We could bring that down to 6 months or to 6 weeks. And the answer to that asylum applicant is either yes, welcome to this country, or I'm sorry, no, you didn't pass the bar and you must return to your country of origin. And we expect them to follow the law, and we enforce that. And then lastly, to your point about fentanyl and human smuggling, about which I'm also very concerned. Right now, those who pose that threat, that risk to our country, are akin to needles in a haystack. They're the vast minority of those who are trying to cross in, but how to, as you just made the point, how do we distinguish them from those who have a legitimate reason and purpose in coming to this country? If we create that safe, legal, orderly path for those who we want to be able to come here, all that is left are those who pose us harm. And we will be so much more effective at being able to stop them, improving the safety and security, not only of our border where I live and where we're raising our kids, but for the rest of the state for that matter. Thanks for these questions. Appreciate it.
Hey, I have time. These are my last two. Go first and then right here.
Hi, my name is
there.
Mia Wells. I'm a senior here. I major in biology. I do have a few questions. My first one, is there going to be a change in the amount of homelessness? There's just a lot of homeless people in Austin, but not just Austin as well, like the state of Texas.
Yes, great question. First of all, you're right. And many of those who are experiencing homelessness are veterans. You know, those who put their lives on the line for this country have come back. We promised them we'd be there for them in their hour of need, and we are not. And in addition, there are a lot of very hardworking Texans who are working full-time jobs and are experiencing homelessness right now. And I've met them here in Austin. I met the guy who's just coming off his shift at Home Depot to go live in his tent by the river. His daughter who works at Whataburger, all of them as a family experiencing homelessness right now in this extraordinarily wealthy state. How can it be that when you work full-time, you do not have a roof over your head? Well, it doesn't help that the minimum wage in this state is $7.25 an hour, where it has been for the last 13 years. Now look, there are some who don't believe we should have a minimum wage at all. They say, allow the invisible hand of the market to decide your worth, and your employer will pay you that. But for most of us, we think there is a floor below which you should not be able to sink. And if you believe that, then for that floor to be set at $7.25 for the last 13 years, despite the increase in costs and prices and inflation, even in just this last year, is an injustice. So let's get that up at least to $15 an hour. That begins to help. The second thing is we don't have enough homes and housing in the fastest growing state in the union. We need to work with local leaders and officials. You know, Greg Kassar, for as long as he's on the city council before he moves to Congress, other members of council in the commissioner's court, they have innovative solutions to meet the housing need here. But right now they have to fight their government and their governor to get that done. I want to be a partner for Austin, Texas, for Houston, Texas, for San Antonio, Texas. And that means bringing state resources to these communities to build more affordable homes, just to make sure we're building more homes altogether. Other things that we've talked about here today, like expanding Medicaid, that brings $10 billion into our communities. When you're healthy enough and well enough to pursue your profession or finish your education, raise your kids, you're less likely to experience homelessness as a result. And then things like investing in universal all-day pre-K and childcare in the state of Texas. It can seem disconnected, but those are costs that can literally bankrupt families, especially single-parent families in this state. And I don't know the number. Somebody here has probably got the statistic, but a surprising number of our fellow Texans are literally one paycheck or one hospital visit away from experiencing homelessness. Last point, Cynthia and I were in Houston, and we were visiting an encampment of those experiencing homelessness under a bridge. And I approached a young woman, and I asked her to tell me her story. And she said that, you know, they were living what she thought was a typical middle-class life in Houston, Texas, with one big problem. That was the fact that her husband was beating her, and beating her to the point that she thought she might lose her life. She got a restraining order against him, and then ultimately he was incarcerated for the violence that he was perpetrating on her. Problem with that was he was the sole breadwinner for that family. She did not have an income to meet the note on the mortgage. And for doing the right thing and saving her life, she was out on the streets. And what got me was that in Houston, at least, I don't know what it's like in Austin, she had to be on the streets for 1 year before she qualified for assistance. And so she said, I'm just biding my time till I hit that 12-month mark. Then I'll be able to get some help and get back up on my feet. When I meet those who are experiencing this right now, no longer statistics or an abstraction, but people whose stories I understand and am moved by. And so we have the resources and the wealth to make this right, whether it's higher pay, more housing, investment in childcare, healthcare, other services. We can beat this. We just got to win this election and then start working together to get it done. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, my last question. Earlier you did mention how easy it was for someone to go in and just buy a gun. Is there going to be, what are your plans on enforcing stricter gun laws to prevent mass shootings, school shootings? It's just, I think it's very unfair to go out and feel unsafe, especially at school.
So here are a couple of ideas. By the way, none of them are perfect, and none of them will avert every instance of gun violence in our communities, but they'll make us a whole hell of a lot safer than we are right now. They will also allow us to continue to defend the Second Amendment, which is important for us as a country, and it's certainly important here in Texas. So first idea that I've heard from those that I've listened to across the state. Right now, you can, at the age of 18, legally walk into a gun store and buy an AR-15 or 2 AR-15s, or I think as many AR-15s as you want to, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, just as that young man at 18 years old in Uvalde did ahead of that school shooting at Robb Elementary last May. Raise that age to 21, and you at least have 3 more years to intervene in that troubled young man's life. Now look, some will immediately come back on me and they'll say, hey Beto, criminals, they'll never follow that law. And they may be right. I think that's what makes them criminals, is they break the law, they commit these crimes. But that young man in Uvalde never tried to get that AR-15 when he was 16 or when he was 17. He patiently waited for his 18th birthday. He might very well do the same if he was 21, and again, it gives us a little bit more time to intervene. Related to that is a red flag law. That says if you already have the firearm and you're now threatening to use it against yourself, you tell someone in your life, hey, I'm going to kill myself with this gun. And I know we hate to talk about it, but we also have a challenge with suicide in the state of Texas, and if we don't confront it, it is not going to get better. People will also say, you know, I may shoot my wife, or I may go into this school and shoot a bunch of kids. The shooter in Uvalde, before he ever walked into Robb Elementary, was known by his friends as the school shooter. So he must have been sending these signals off so strongly about what he intended to do, but law enforcement had no recourse to intervene before it was too late. A red flag law says, through due process, we can come get that gun, take it away from you before you use it against yourself or somebody else. And then this last idea, which is a universal background check. If you go into a gun store in Texas today, they run a background check on you. They make sure that you're not a danger to yourself or anyone else. But if you buy from a private seller, as a young man in Midland, Odessa did in 2019, who was rejected from a gun shop through their background check, you can buy that AR-15, no questions asked. And none of us are the safer or the wiser for it. He used that AR-15 against those in the community and shot down 8 people on that day. So those 3 ideas, universal background checks, red flag laws, raising the minimum age of purchase, those would have averted tragedies that I just described, many others out there. And again, it's not anybody's vision of perfection, but it is the consensus and some compromise that allows us to make progress, move forward, take action, and save the lives of others in a state where today the leading cause of death for young people is gun violence. So these are some ideas I've heard from our fellow Texans that I think we can make progress on. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
This is our last question.
All right, Maia, this is our last one.
Do you support reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act and expanding it to protection?
Yes, absolutely. And I voted for that reauthorization when I was in Congress. I know, I don't think he's here any longer, but I know our future Congress member, Greg Casar, will be supportive of that as well. I don't understand those who oppose this, given the epidemic of violence that we see against women. In fact, in the state of Texas, a woman is 24% more likely to experience gun violence from a domestic partner than a woman in any other state. So your question and the question asked previously are very much connected. Now, VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, is a piece of federal legislation, but as governor, I have a role to represent you with our federal partners in Congress and in the White House, and I'm going to make sure that they hear us loud and clear that we want every woman in Texas protected. So thank you for asking the question. All right, Huston-Tillotson, thank you for having us out. We'll hang out for a little bit. Le agradezco. Thank you.
Just out there.